Well, hello. This is going to be the first simple project that you're going to be working on using the InDesign application. And for those of you who are not familiar with Adobe Creative Cloud and the InDesign application, it is represented by this icon down, if you're on the Mac, in your drawer, the ID. And this is the end result of the very simple robot that I'm drawing as an example. Um, but obviously, I'm hoping that you all come up with your own ideas. But I just wanted to give you an introduction to the toolbar that your tools that you're going to be using in the toolbar, as well as some other key concepts that I want you to understand from the very start. So once you launch the Adobe InDesign application, you're going to open up a new document. And the way that we're going to do that is you're going to say File, New, Document, and you're going to get this screen. Okay, there's a lot of information here, and yours might look a little bit different depending on your last use of the application. We're going to be designing for print. You can also design for web-based applications or for mobile, like an iPhone or any iOS device, an iPad. But we're going to specifically be targeting the print production area for this class. So I'm going to say print. When I select print, you'll notice that now it is displaying different sized pages for print. And the default is letter. So I'm going to click letter. And you'll notice over here, you may not be familiar with this measurement system, which is points and picas. In InDesign, that is actually the default measurement used because it is the default measurement for publication design. But to keep it easy, I'm going to change it to inches over here. And if you are from across the pond or another country and you use millimeters or centimeters, feel free to choose that. It's really whatever you understand and use in your daily life. So I'm going to change this to inches, and I can now see that it's displayed as 8.5 inches by 11 inches. And just to let you know, if I toggle back to picas, I haven't changed the size. This is still an 8.5 by 11 sheet or page, but it's being displayed in the measurement system units called picas. So sometimes that can be confusing to people. So I'm going to go back and change it to inches. I only want one page, and the first page is going to be page 1. And we're not going to necessarily pay attention to columns right now. And I'm going to uncheck facing pages because it's only 1. You want to title your document Robot. And it's always good to have your name on there too, so that I know whose project I'm grading. So I'm going to come in here and click in front and say Mandy Robot. And while we're at it, I want to just let you guys know, when you are naming files, you should never use a dot in them, because the dot is used for file extensions for identifying what type of a file it is. And it can really confuse the computer if you add dots to any name. So just make sure you don't ever use dot to like separate first name and last name or anything like that. Okay, now I'm going to say create. And as you can see, I now have a file, and the file name is up here, Mandy's Robot, and my blank page. The black line represents the page edges, and this magenta line represents my margins. And margins, another word if you're in the film, is called your safe zone. And typically, you don't want to place any of your objects or text images outside in this area, outside of the margins, because you are at risk for having it get cut off in the final printing process. I can also see that I am zoomed in at 52%, and which means this is being viewed at 52% of its actual size. Okay. Now I'm going to come back here to my original file that I've already created, and you'll see mine is a 2-page spread, a left and right facing page. And because I wanted you to see the end result, And now I'm going to redraw it here just to kind of give you some context as to what this project is about. It's a simple robot and you can do more than one. In fact, I encourage you to draw as many as you'd like on a page, just so that you can play around with the tools and have some fun. Process-wise, when you start an InDesign document, I'm going to always suggest you do a couple of things first to set yourself up. And the first one is you should always reset your workspace. Resetting the workspace kind of gets you back to square one, where all of the panels, and these are the panels, and the toolbar is set back to a default. Rather, because what InDesign will do is if you don't reset it, it's going to open up all the tools that you used last time you were in it. So under Window, Workspace, what you want to do is reset it. And the default for InDesign is the Essentials workspace, but there are also a number of other workspaces, and I'll get into these more as we do different projects. But for now, we're going to reset the Essentials workspace. Now, you didn't see a whole lot happen because I reset it before we got started, but just for the intents and purposes of showing you what it could do, I'm just going to move a bunch of stuff around. I'm going to pull out another window that's typically not out, which is animation. All right, so I have all these panels out now. And if I were to save this document and close InDesign, the next time I open this document, it would be disorganized like this. So we always want to reorganize our workspace, and I'll say workspace reset essentials, and you'll see what happens is it gets it back to the default setting workspace of the essentials. Okay, let's get started drawing our robot. What you're primarily going to be using in this particular exercise is I'm going to move my toolbar in because there's no need for it to be way out here. And you'll notice this is called a floating panel. I can move it around. Or if I want to dock it back, I would just drag it over to the sidebar. And when I see that blue line, it means I'm docking it. But I don't want to dock it. I want to bring it in closer to where I'm going to be working, which is actually over on this page. And another panel that's not typically out as part of the essentials that I want you to use is the Align panel. And those are always found, panels that are not displayed on the right are always under the Window drop down. And under here, I can see the Align is under Objects and Layout, and then there's a submenu, Align. And I want to pull that one out because I'm going to be using this. And by the way, the intent of this exercise is really for you to have fun and experiment. There are no wrong submissions other than you just not submitting it. But I just want to see that you've kind of experimented and used different tools to get used to them. Okay, so the Shape tool is the primary tool you're going to be using in that, and that is here. And when you see this little down arrow at the bottom of a tool, it means that there's other tools embedded underneath the one being displayed. And if you click and hold down your mouse, it will actually bring up the hidden tools. So under this polygon is the rectangle and an ellipse, and then there's the polygon itself. And these letters to the far right represent what are called the keyboard shortcuts. So if I press the letter M while I'm in my selection tool, it will give me the rectangle tool, M for rectangle. Okay, so I've got my rectangle tool ready to draw, and if I duplicate this, I'm just going to draw a square. And you'll notice that depending on how I draw it, I can make it as tall or as wide as I want. Now what we have here is a black stroke and no fill. And I know that because I can see it, but I can also look down here And this is your stroke and fill buttons. And these can be found in a number of places. Notice if I mouse over it, it gives me a description as to what the tool is. So here's my fill and here's my stroke. You can also find the stroke and the fill up here. I don't want to just have a black stroke with no fill, so I'm going to click on the fill arrow and it brings up the various different color swatches that currently exist in my color swatch panel. So I'm going to pick the magenta. So I've now filled it. But what I don't want is I don't want to have this black stroke here. So I'm going to come in and click here and say none. No stroke. Next, I'm going to draw the arms, and this time, however, I'm going to set up my stroke and fill in advance so I don't have to keep going back. It's just a workflow efficiency step. So I'm going to pre-select, before I choose the tool, magenta fill, and notice that I can select my stroke here, and I don't want any stroke, so I'm going to say none. So magenta fill, no stroke. And then I'm going to come back here, whoops, cancel that, and I'm going to draw out my arm. And now, as you can see, it's already filling with the magenta. So there's from my shoulder to my elbow, and then I want to draw it from my elbow to my hand. Right? And in order to move, and again, I'm going to copy so that the proportions are the same on both arms. If I select this and hold down my Option Shift key and drag, it makes a copy. So I'm going to position it right about there. And I'm going to position this right about here. There we go. So I've got 2 arms, 2 forearms, 2 shoulders, and a body. Now, if you want to rotate these like I've done down here, I'm going to select both of these at the same time by shift clicking, holding down the shift key as I select both. And you'll notice this is what's called the bounding box. It's the box that goes around the selected shapes. And when I hover right around the corner, I get this double arrow, and that's the rotation tool. So once I get that double arrow, if I hold it down, my mouse, and move the direction I want to rotate, it rotates both. So now my shoulder has been rotated. Next, I want to draw the head, and that's going to require me to get, once again, the ellipse tool, so I can just say L. And this time I want it to be yellow. So I'm going to come up here to my fill, and I'm going to say yellow. But it may not look like it, but these black lines around the yellow circle, it's actually a line. And I'm going to show you how to make that type of a line. So I'm going to say I want my line to be black. And then you'll notice here next to the stroke, I have a menu of different types of lines or strokes that I can make. So I'm going to select, just for the heck of it, I'm going to select this one. And now if I hold the shift key as I draw my circle, it will make a proportional circle, meaning it'll be as wide as it is tall. And you can see that I have a yellow fill. And I think I'm also going to beef up this line a little bit. So I'm going to change it to 10 points. There, it's much more visible. I'm going to make 2 eyes now. So again, I'm going to want the eyes to be black. So again, thinking ahead, I'm going to change my fill. Whoops. Now what just happened? I had the head selected, and so when I changed the fill color, it changed the fill color on my head, and I didn't want that. But not to worry, there's a keyboard command called Command Z, and it undoes what you just did. So I'm going to say Command Z, and I'm back to my yellow head. And I'm just going to click anywhere else on the page to deselect it. And now I have my black fill. And I'm going to click L for my ellipse. And I'm going to draw two eyes. They don't have to be the same size at this point. Kind of like that they're not. And then I'm going to use the line tool and draw a line for the mouth. And here's something else to make note of. What happened? Well, here's what happened. This is a line, and lines don't have fills. Lines are strokes. So notice here it says no stroke. So what I actually have to do is set my stroke. So I'm going to make it, there's three parts to it. It has to have a color attribute. So I'm going to say a black stroke. And then it has a weight. And I think I'm going to make it a little heavier than 1 point. I'm going to make it 3 point. And then it has a style. And I just want it to be a solid. So now I've made my mouth. Last part, we're coming into the end. I'm going to draw my legs, and I'm going to go to the rectangle tool. And before I draw, I think I want remember, you're always thinking about the fill and the stroke before you draw, although you can change it after you've drawn. So I want the legs to be green, and I don't want any stroke, so the stroke here is set to none. And now I can begin drawing. So I'm going to draw one leg here, and I can either draw a separate leg, or if I want them both to be exactly the same size, I can get my selection tool, the black arrow tool, click on it, Option Shift drag, and it makes an exact duplicate copy. And then for my feet, I'm going to use a different shape. I'm going to use the polygon. So I'm going to come over here, and the polygon, you'll notice, doesn't have a keyboard shortcut. So you have to use the toolbar. And I'm going to draw out a polygon, and I want those to be black. Now here's an example of after the fact, you can change the color. So I'm going to come up here into my fill and say, I want the fill color to be black. Now here's where the Align tool comes in, and it's actually a very valuable tool, and I just want you to kind of get used to thinking about it. This foot should actually be aligned to the bottom of the leg, and right now it's off kilter. So the way that you use the Align tool, remember I brought that out in the very beginning, the Align panel, is you select the two objects that you want to align. And so I want to align the foot so it's directly beneath the leg. So holding down my shift key, I'm going to do that again. You hold the shift key. The shift key allows you to select multiple objects at the same time. So I'm going to shift click here and then shift click here. I have both objects selected, and coming over here, I want to align them on their horizontal, meaning up and down centers, and this little graphic gives you an idea. And when I do that, notice how it shifts both of them to be aligned on their horizontal center. And then I'm just going to use my arrow, right and left arrow keys to move this over. And again, I can click here, hold down my Option Shift key to duplicate it, and do the same thing here. And just for practice, shift click both of these, align the objects on their horizontal center, and there we go. So have fun, play with the various different tools, experiment. As I said before, there really is no wrong. I just want to see that you've opened up the design document and started playing around with some of the tools.